Hi, good morning. I need to just purge the thoughts in my head. And so the first thing I want to talk about is narcissism. And I'm probably going to do two different videos this morning. So if you're just joining me, great, welcome. Hi. This morning I'm going to talk quite a bit on narcissism. So I've very much ventured into the world of I don't know what I've ventured into. I'm working on that, and I'm needing titles and vernacular for where I'm at because what I'm doing is very different, and I haven't tread this road before. So some people like to follow the path made by others because they have other agendas that they need to take care of because their purpose in life revolves around something else. And some people just that's not what they do. That's not what they enjoy. Then there are some people who not only build their lives around making or following the path that others have gone down, and maybe they might make it into their own, or maybe they'll still lead and go down this path. It's like there's variations of leader. There's the people who don't lead at all, and then there's the people who do lead, but they want to make sure the path is very clear ahead. And then there's the people, and this is me, where it's I'm going to completely go so far off the path that there is no path. I have a scythe in my hand and I am creating my own path as I go through. And that's my category. So, in fact, I am so averse to not to I am so averse to anything that isn't making my own path that I get anxiety if I am not carving my own way ahead. And this is from simple things to grand things. So, if somebody hosts an event and it's like the in thing or the trending thing to do where everyone goes to this event, count me out. It's like, "Oh, no, that's too lemming for me," or "That's too it's really not my thing." That's where the anxiety really kicks in for me. I can't do it. And if I do it, it's more as an observer, and I have to be standing outside of the crowd watching and looking in. I cannot be I think this is where I'm a wallflower, and I just haven't accepted that part of me yet. And I need to accept that part of me that I'm a wallflower. But if I'm not wallflowering, then I am creating my own path and going my own direction. And my problem with this is I don't know if it's a problem, but it just means that there's a lot of uncharted territory. So I'm losing a lot of there's nothing to call this. It's like it's like I'm on an undiscovered island all the time and I'm finding stuff and I'm discovering things and I have no words to describe what I'm learning. So, and I did this with psychology where I maxed out all the knowledge. I got all the information together and then I took it to that next level of okay, now that you've completely mastered psychology, let's go on to that next level. Let's reinvent it or let's create something entirely new now. So, and that's where I've been for the last 5 to 8 years with psychology is I reached mastery in 2015, 2016. And then I really kicked it up and said, okay, now that I've mastered, it's time to reinvent and do research and discover new. This is where the life of dissertations and abstracts come from. This is where you do the research and you apply, you theorize, and you test and you invent. So that's where I'm at with my psych. And I'm at a point now where, and I love this about me. This is like my favorite thing about psychology is when you get to this level, you have an emotion and you can immediately step back from the emotion and say, whoa, there's a feeling present. Let's examine this. And within like a couple seconds, I can go, okay, that's the feeling of this. It's located here. This is why. This is what I need to do. Boom, boom, boom. And it's done. You wrap it up nicely. And within about, I think my record is about 10, 15 minutes where I can completely wrap up my issue and set it aside. But I'm at a point where, and this is where narcissism comes into it, where there's a lot more happening. There's a lot going on. And I'm now taking a step back and I've discovered this other realm and I'm just going to call this realm X for now. So I'm going to set X aside because that's going to be my second video is I'm going to talk about X. So I've been working with X and I have to compose all these words, definitions. I have to figure out, okay, what is this called? And every time I dabble into other people's research, it actually takes away from my raw knowledge. I lose the ability to see insights that other people have overlooked. It's like you're so busy making a cake and focusing on following the recipe that you lose the ability to think originally or outside of the box because you're so conditioned to conform to follow the recipe, follow the recipe, follow the recipe that you can't expand out and think, what if it could be different? This is really, really it right here. The core of our understanding is either, and this is very much this is not a right way or a wrong way. This is not a derogatory good thing or a derogatory bad thing. This is just some people are A, some people are B, some people are C. Think about the Myers-Briggs personality test. This is the best way to explain it. Now, imagine if there's more to a personality than the Myers-Briggs personality test. Spoiler alert, there is. And one of the things that you're looking at with the Myers-Briggs personality test or any personality test, why would you? Anyway, focus, focus, focus. So, one of the things you would notice is that you have, are you a person who likes to lead? Are you a person who likes to follow? Are you a person who likes to go so far off the beaten path that you have to create the actual path yourself? And then there's people who they have to do trial and error or they have to be told exactly how to do it. And then we come along, narcissists come along and they tag on labels and name calling, character assassination titles to these people, like a lemming. I should not have said that earlier. But that's exactly it, is that comes from our societal label of, I'm going to encourage this person to be a leader. You want to be a leader? No, you don't want to be a leader. Some people are leaders. And this is really, really important. This is it. Some people are leaders and some people are followers. And it is not good, nor is it bad. It just is. And it's how we're different. And we're obsessed in our society today with so much with labeling good and bad, good and bad. And we think in this good and bad. And where that comes from is very much our narcissistic society. Our society is absolutely a narcissist. And this is one of my favorite things about studying sociology. When I was really deep into Roman history and studying how things unfolded there, what I noticed was that you have a person who can behave as a narcissist, who can envelop and take on all the personality traits of a narcissist. But beyond that, you have a society. Let's say you have a church congregation. The church develops its own personality type. The church itself, the whole congregation. Whenever you have, even in a marriage, if you have a coupling, you have two people. As soon as you have those two people together, you have the individual A, individual B, and then you have the entities together, which make up individual three. There's actually three personalities working. So you have person A's personality, person B's personality, but then you have the collaboration of the two of them together with an entirely new personality. And this is what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to relationships. It doesn't stop with two people. When you have a family unit of, let's say, 5 people, boom, now you've got person A, person B, person C, person D, person E. And you've got these 5 personalities with individuals, but you've got this combination, you've got this combination, you've got this combination, you've got this combination. You also have this combination and this combination. And you see where I'm going with this, but you also have this combination and this combination and this combination of people, so on and so forth, right? So when you have all of this together, you're looking at a massive amount of interaction of personalities and characteristics. And then you have the conglomerate as a whole, the full unit. Now let's expand that outside of a family unit of 5 people. Let's look at something larger like, let's go back to the church congregation. Now you're looking at how the church thinks and moves on itself. You've got the democracy going on. You've got people making votes. You've got people deciding who's going to be the church leader. You've got all these different variables coming together. And those variables, when they all play together, they create and the vibe. It's the vibe. It's the whole feeling. It's when you walk into a church when you're looking for a congregation, and it could be anything. It could be a classroom. It could be a book club. Everyone who comes together brings their own variation and their own recipe, and that molds it And this is sociology. It molds it into its own psychology. It becomes like this whole thing. And this thing, this entity keeps growing. It doesn't stop with 5 people. It doesn't stop with 30 people. It doesn't stop with 200. It goes until you have a full country. The state of New York is its own personality. The state of Mississippi has its own personality. The state of California has its own personality. And then you have a group or a congregation inside of that inside of that personality. You have all of New York City with its own personality. New York City is different than Buffalo, New York. Oh my God, is it? But each one of them has their own personality. Niagara Falls is going to have its own personality separate than Manhattan. Oh my God, we're going to break this down further. Manhattan has its own personality different than Staten Island. We have Brooklyn, and then that's so different from the Bronx. And then when you get into, let's break it down even further, you've got Gravesend with its own personality. That's where I am, is Gravesend. That's down by Coney Island. And then you have Bushwick with its entirely different personality. With Manhattan, this is one of my favorite things to do with Manhattan. You have Manhattan, but then you get into Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village does not feel like the Upper East Side. Oh my God, it does not. It's night and day. You cross the street as soon as you leave the Upper East Side and you enter the Lower East Side. As soon as you cross into the East Village, completely different vibe, completely different chemistry. It's an entirely different sociological personality. And you can feel that difference, especially if you're tuned in and you're sensitive to it. You can feel that shift. You can feel that change from neighborhood to neighborhood. It's a game I used to play with my daughter, that I still play with my daughter, where I'll take her through Manhattan and I won't tell her which neighborhood we're in. I'll tell her, hey, I want you to feel the difference. Let me know when you think we've crossed into the next neighborhood. And she's spot on. She's almost every time she is spot on. And she'll go, whoa, something just changed. And I'm like, congratulations. You've noticed that we just left the Upper East Side. And she's starting to tune in. She's starting to feel the difference. 42nd Street feels different than 72nd Street. It's amazing how these conglomerations just work with each other. So you can have an entire body, an entire group of people, thousands of people who behave as one unit as a narcissist. You really can. And our society in the United States is a narcissistic society. The whole society. Because the majority of the laws that are made reflect the narcissist personality. Because the religions that are chosen do reflect, okay, one specific religion reflects the narcissistic personality. It's the only one that I've noticed that hasn't. The others, not really. So when you get all of these variations together, or these variables together, suddenly there are colloquials, there are media comments, there's social media going around, there's news reports going around reflecting very subtly, and in other cases not subtle at all, these narcissistic traits. So when you're sitting at home and you're watching TV and you're listening to the news, you're going to hear narcissism. So you think, I don't have any. I mean, I feel narcissistic abuse syndrome. I'm experiencing the symptoms, but everybody in my life is great. Why do I have narcissistic abuse syndrome? Because our society is a very much a narcissistic society. Like, think about one of the things I'm huge on. I love going topless. I am a nudist, and I am huge on it's my right. And in New York State, it's legal. That doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean I'm safe if I do it. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get backlash. I do. So now it's me versus the societal norm, what the society allows. And this is where the laws may be A, but then there's what the people allow, what the society allows, the comments that are made, the reference that are spoken. So this is where I'm starting to look at it all going, okay, yeah, I see this. I see where it's all kind of coming together. So I have spoken to several people where they'll be like, my parents weren't narcissists, and I'll go through it with them and like, okay, yeah, your parents were not narcissists. They're not attracting narcissistic spouses. They don't have narcissistic children. They don't have it in their life, but they're still twitching. They're still there. It's still in their head. It's still, and it's because a religious leader or a teacher that they were exposed to was a narcissist. And because of that simple little inlet into their life, suddenly they're experiencing it. So, and this is why I've stepped so completely out of the patriarchy. This is why I have so, okay, this is where the narcissistic culture is. I'm not going to be a part of it. And as best to my ability, I have separated and taken myself out of it as much as I can, so that I have found a sanctuary and I have built my home. I have built my entire existence outside of the patriarchy. Literally removed myself from the narcissistic society that's there so that it can't touch me. So when I do get exposed to it, I'm hypersensitive to it. I want to be hypersensitive to it. I want the radar going off in my head so I can go, "Whoa, that's dangerous. I need to stay away from it." It's called sensitization. And when you live in a society that is narcissistic, it desensitizes you to the warning signs. Suddenly you're not able to notice when someone gaslights you because you've gotten used to it. It's the norm. So I've put myself in a position, and this is what I encourage everyone to do: get yourself out of a place where you're no longer being constantly subjected to it. So it's constantly dumbing you down. It's constantly desensitizing you. You want the sensitivity to it so that you can get your radar back up and working, so you can step away from it, so you can remove yourself from it and recognize it for what it is. Because if you don't recognize it, then you're vulnerable to it. A lack of awareness opens you up for vulnerability. 100%. Absolutely. So, and I'm going to like put that in the comments here. So, a lack of awareness, this is how I take notes. A lack of awareness, we call this an anaism, sets you up for vulnerability. And so, to counter vulnerability, and this is big, to counter vulnerability, you want to become aware. You want to become sensitized. You want the tools in your arsenal so you can go, whoa, that's something I don't want around me. And I base my parenting 100% off of these techniques. I want my children educated. I want them aware. I want them sensitized. And that way, when they're exposed to something toxic or abusive, they're able to go, I know what that is. I'm educated. I know exactly what that is. I've taken my daughter and completely, well, despite or with the exception of the school system, I've pulled her completely out of the patriarchy. So when she's home, she doesn't get exposure to this. The people that I bring around her are absolutely also living and existing outside of the patriarchy. And because these people are doing that, oh, I just realized something. Okay, I need to focus. Because of that, she's able to recognize it at 15 years old. Now, when I was 15, I couldn't recognize it. So I'm looking at the work I'm doing with her, and I'm able to step back from that and say, okay, this is absolutely going in the right direction. And it's showing in other ways where she can assert herself. She can step up and say what she needs to say. It's quite astounding to watch how she's able to take the awareness and boost her confidence with it. It's wonderful. It's very encouraging, but it's something I would love to see everyone do, is sensitize yourself to it, make yourself aware. Through awareness, a lack of awareness sets you up for vulnerability. So become aware, become educated, and you stop being vulnerable. You become fortified against the abuser because you're aware. So back to the narcissist. When you have the narcissist, it's what was I saying about it? I was like on this whole focal thing, and I very much see the world divided between narcissists and empaths. I really do. I can't get away from this concept because the more I look into it, the more I study sociology, the more I study the influence of religion in the Roman Empire in our current societal situation, the more I'm just going, oh my God, the narcissism is very much like there's people who do the grooming, and then there's the people who were abused and groomed. And if you're groomed and abused by a narcissist, you fall into one of two categories. And again, I'm going to remind you, this is not black and white. This is a spectrum. This is a spectrum. So that you fall into one of two categories. You either become the narcissist, the next generation of narcissist, or you become an empath. Now, again, you could be a narcissist with empathic traits. You can be an empath with narcissistic traits. Everybody has it inside of them. Everybody's got both traits inside of them. Some people fall to far extremes. Imagine that right wing, left wing, and you can fall at any degree along that spectrum. So for me, I am way over here. I used to be here where I had a bit of that narcissistic trait come out of me. I noticed that I had dry narcissism where it's like, oh, I was speaking to one of my clients last night, and she's very much an empath. Very, very much an empath. Very, very much. I haven't been able to determine exactly who the original narcissist in her life was. I want to say parents. Based on how severe hers is, I want to say parents. But her husband is very definitely a grandiose narcissist and not a part-time narcissist where so with narcissism, it's a PTSD trigger. It's a defense mode. When you have a mental illness, they always trigger through PTSD, or it's always like PTSD. There's a trigger, so it flips on and it flips off. And for some people, it flips on and it stays on, and they cannot shut it off. With and if you get triggered and you through the trigger you become narcissistic, that's when they call it narcissistic personality disorder. But if you get triggered and you go into borderline personality traits, now you're looking at borderline personality disorder. But if you get triggered and nothing happens, you just go into a full basic you behavior happens, like you just become complete shutdown and you tremble or you react to it without actually triggering any of these other mental illnesses. They call PTSD, which is basically a catch-all phrase for it's when you get triggered, but it doesn't really put you in any of the categories. And everybody who has, yeah, I'm going to say it. Everybody, if you have narcissistic abuse syndrome, you have PTSD. If you have borderline personality disorder, you have PTSD. If you have ADD, ADHD, you have PTSD. If you have depression, you have PTSD. And it's astonishing to watch. I hold off on that one with depression. I'm starting to think that depression is not a mental illness. I think I think that depression, this is my hypothesis. I'm working on the research to prove this at the moment, but I think depression is actually just being stuck in the 5 stages of grief. Some people get stuck in the shock disbelief stage. Some people get stuck in the anger stage, and we say that those people have anger management issues, but they don't actually have a diagnosis because it's not actually a mental disorder. They're just stuck in the anger stage. And then there's people who are stuck in the depression stage. Now, for some reason, when you're stuck in the depression stage, people slap that onto a mental illness. Oh, he's got depression. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. If you can be stuck in anger and if you can be stuck in shock, disbelief, and negotiation, you tell me, please, why are we labeling depression as a mental disorder, but not the other two? We don't. In fact, when we see people who are stuck in the anger, it's addressed in a completely different fashion where we'll sit down and we'll say, let's talk about the grief process. What exactly happened that stuck you in anger? If you're stuck in shock and disbelief, we'll treat it like, oh, the 5 stages of grief. Let's talk about why you're stuck in this process. But then we get to depression and it's going, oh, yeah, well, let's put chemicals in those bodies. Let's just put medicine inside of those persons. That's no, they're stuck in the stages of grief, and you need to walk them through why they're feeling stuck. Like, what did they lose that stalled out? I believe that depression hits when the loss of accepting the new belief is greater than the gain of the new perspective. That's it. I think that's it. It's when the loss exceeds the gain of perspective. Then depression hits and you get stuck because you've lost more than you've gained. Any other time, it's equal or you gain more than you lose. For instance, I just went through a breakup. I was stuck in the shock disbelief stage for a year. And once I realized that, I was able to apply the appropriate questions to my subconscious, which was able to move my subconscious from refusing to rejecting the statement and then transferring it over, going, okay, I've accepted it now. And then I was able to go through anger and depression happened. And when the depression happened, I felt it. Everything shifted again, where it went from, it settled down into okay, I've lost A, B, C, D. And then I felt sad, which is, yeah, that's the grieving process. I felt sad from all the losses, but then I could see all the gains. Now, the gains are greater than the losses. So the depression cleared up in a few days. But my VIP, he's been depressed for 30 years. And around the time that the depression hit, an incident in his life hit where he had a loss, and that loss was far greater than his gains. And that put him in depression, and he is still in depression, and he can't get over that. And then his subconscious stepped in and wiped all the memory that was beyond that particular point. So he doesn't understand why he's feeling the depression, like what he can't recall exact detail. And that's where he's still stuck. So I'm looking at it going, again, going back to the whole PTSD and things getting triggered, I don't think depression is a mental illness. I think medicating people who are depressed enables the depression. I believe that some medications enable the mental disorder, but I do not believe depression is a mental disorder. I believe that it is just stalling out through the stages of grief, and you need help getting unstuck from whichever stage you're stuck in. So that being said, it's quite extra. There's a lot more that I'm looking into, but that's the current theory. So getting back to narcissism, it's not that you've got PTSD and narcissism and borderline here. What you really have is PTSD, which is the umbrella. Either you're triggered or you're not. And then under each one of these is what kind of a trigger is it? Is it a general catch-all trigger, PTSD, or is it a narcissistic trigger, or is it a borderline personality disorder trigger? And it's going to like shoot off one of those. And there's more. It's not just those three. There's more. But with narcissism, the whole encompassing, it's a mental illness that is literally designed to groom others into the mental illness. It's amazing. Like on a psychological, scientific, wow, this is extraordinary. It's amazing. And when you see it, and it's so when I studied Rome, and this is where a lot of it came from, is when I studied Roman history, what I noticed with Rome was how narcissistic Rome was on a whole. I'm not going to get into this now. I'm going to do like the history of narcissism and how Rome used narcissism to take over the world. And they did. Like I am a full, let me just put it to you this way. Narcissism comes from narcissist, from Narcissus. Narcissus, I can't speak Greek and Roman, who was the man who fell in love with his own shadow according to the myth. Like narcissistic personality disorder actually comes from this Greek mythology, which we all know the Romans took over the Greek, they imperialized, which is what they do. Think about it. The Romans took over and imperialized Greece. They completely stripped out all the culture. They destroyed everything, but then they adopted what they wanted, which was the mythology. So then they changed the names of all the gods. They switched everything over, and they left their mark, and they obliterated as much of the Greek culture as they could. And they did this with every culture they imperialized, just like a narcissist. So when they were done, you have the Roman Empire, who anytime anyone threatened them, they'd crucify them. They killed Socrates. They killed Spartacus. They killed Jesus, all of whom were perceived as threats to the Roman Empire. You threaten the Roman Empire, they take you down. Just like a narcissist. So there's a lot of, like, when I was studying Roman history, when I was a Romanologist, and I was just diving deep into it, and then looking at the psychology that I was studying, and it was extraordinary just to see very much how much Rome absolutely encompassed the narcissistic personality disorder as a whole. It's extraordinary. And I have yet to find documentation. Every time I study a book, every time I go back to that kind of literature, every time I read Plutarch, every time I read Plato, I look at it and go, oh my God, this is so narcissistic. And It's just extraordinary, and that's how I see similarities between Rome and today's society. And I'm like I said, I'm not gonna get into exactly how and when, I'll do that in another video, but for now, we have a narcissistic society, we very much do. And there is what I've noticed with psychology is I'm at that level where I'll wake up every morning, I'll do my meditation, I'll do my deep breath, I'll feel it, and I'll be like, "Okay." And I'll do a body scan, and I identify my emotions, and I go, "Okay, so my emotions are ABC, this is where they belong, this is where they all are. Check, check, check." I put them all together, and psychologically speaking, I can, like, clean them up, no problem, and then move on with my day. However, and this is where it gets interesting, it's when I've exhausted all my psych and it's still not working, and that's where I go back into that other realm of X. And when I look at that other realm, and I always find my answers there, which tells me that there's absolutely a balance between psychology and realm X. And the more I look into this, the more I go, okay, today's problem or this particular problem isn't a psychology problem, it's an X problem. And or I'll look into an X problem and I'll go, oh, that's not the problem. The problem is psychology, and I'm able to clean. I always start with psychology though. I always start with psychology. And if psychology doesn't work, then I look into realm X. And when I look into realm X, that's when I notice certain things. That's where I find and locate and I plug it in and I fix it and I go, okay, there you go, which tells me more and more that there is a balance between the two. And a narcissist is not tuned into realm X. They're not. It's like they've been denied access. This is what I love about Realm X is Realm X 100% is set up, and we've just naturally done this to reject and remove the narcissist from it. They cannot enter Realm X because it requires humility, real genius, and it's set up by empaths, which is why Realm X has been shunned from our society so much, is because Realm X is anti-narcissist. This is the point of this video. This is it right here. Is when we live in a narcissistic society, everything that's okay, everything that's acceptable, everything that's been defined as within the realm of belief and within the realm of being inside the box is the narcissistic stamp of approval. And when you have anything outside of that narcissistic stamp of approval, I'm going to use that narcissistic. I'm going to write this down so I don't forget it. Narcissistic stamp of approval. And they do. It's the narcissist asks the question, can I use this to control? And if they can't use it to control, they don't want it. They stamp it. They say, nope, this is, throw it out. If they can use it, then they claim it. It's literally our society is a massive sorting system of enabling the narcissist. Our society, I'm going to say this, our society enables the narcissist. And because our society enables the narcissist, what ends up happening is there's a lot of things that are cherry picked and put into our society. One of my favorite examples of this is philosophy. Philosophy is the study of thinking. Philosophy is the subject matter, the area of study that teaches a person to think. It is, in my opinion, more important than mathematics, more important than reading. Because, yeah, I'm saying it, because if you can think, you have oral tradition. You don't need to count. You don't need to write. You need to think. Now, it's a great reading, writing philosophy. Now it's reading and writing. It's mathematics and philosophy. When you put those three things together, you are powerful. But at some point, around the 16th century, the narcissists of society immediately said, oh, philosophy is actually working against us because we can't use our narcissistic powers to or influence to get exactly what we want. So they removed philosophy from schools. They removed it from the majority of public education, which is why we don't have it in our society today, which is why philosophy is a dead subject. The only one who studies philosophy are people who go into college and have that inkling of I'm going to study, but no one wakes up and says I'm going to be a philosopher when I grow up, except me. That's what I did. I woke up because that, again, that whole, oh, look, a path that I can create on my own. So I decided I want to be a philosopher when I grow up. I really do. I really do. Like that is my dream. I want to be a philosopher when I grow up. I am a philosopher. I'm finally all grown up. So that being said, philosophy threatens the narcissist because if you think, the philosopher can't control you. So the narcissistic society put a stamp of basically, no, we don't want this in our society. And they removed it from our society because they found it easier to control people. One of my favorite examples is when I was prescribed Zoloft. I was on it for a few months and I noticed that I was completely a psychopath. There was no emotion. I had no emotional, I was emotionally dead for a year. And when I realized this and I proposed coming off the medication to my husband, who was a diagnosed narcissist, he says to me, no, no, you're easier to control. Oh my God, he actually said this to me. No, you're easier to control. I'm going to keep you on the meds. And he refused to take me to the doctor to take me off the meds. He refused to allow me to come off the Zoloft. I had to Google research how to wean yourself off of Zoloft safely, and I had to put myself through it. And it took me about 3 months. But at the end of the 3 months, I could feel my feelings coming back. And it was about the fourth month in, I saw something that he did, and I blew up. And he was like, whoa, are you taking your meds? And I'm like, no, I took myself off the meds. It was a whole thing and literally the end of our relationship. But the point is that encompasses like that example is how narcissists think and function. 100%. They seek to control. So they literally comb through and they put stamp of approval on things. And if you find something that does not meet their stamp of approval, they throw it away. So in the 16th century, Realm X, Age of Enlightenment, by the way, Realm X was deemed, oh, I can't use this to control. In fact, it actually is interfering with my ability to control people, so I'm going to throw it away. And it literally got cast out of our society. And then the narcissists turned it into, well, they turned us into a laughing stock. Anyone who dabbles in Realm X are immediately referred to as the slander begins. You become a whack job. You become discredited. There's a lot of slander. Now the labels come in. Here's a clue. If somebody uses a label on you, they're a narcissist. Think about it. So I think that's really like, this is like the narcissistic pre-speech to where I'm going to take the next video. So this is like part 1 of part 2. And it's really important that you understand that society has a narcissistic personality trait to it. Now, it doesn't have to have narcissistic personality trait. A community can take up any kind of a group or any kind of a personality. One of my favorite things that I hear a lot about is, especially from my mom, is I don't like that church. It was too gossipy. She's not talking about one person. She's talking about the entire congregation. So she left the church because it was too gossipy. By the way, gossip is a narcissistic trait. So I watched my mother leave several churches because they were too gossipy. And she was not referring to an individual, it was the whole congregation, the whole vibe in general, because she was looking at, this is sociology, it was the psychological profile that the entire community takes on. And you see that with groups, you see that in anything. It's absolutely amazing to see how much a society encompasses a single personality. It really is. It's amazing on a psychological standpoint. It's absolutely fascinating to me to watch. So keep that in mind, that it's not just the parents who are narcissistic. It's not just the spouse or the sibling that was narcissistic that abused you, or the teacher. It was also the patriarchy. our politics, our society. That's also narcissistic. So I am in the profession of literally pulling myself out of all of it. I didn't just do the whole, I'm going to cut my narcissistic parents out. I'm going to cut my narcissistic siblings out. I'm going to cut my narcissistic husbands out. No, I went the extreme. I went all the way. No, I want none of it in my life. So I cut out the entire society. I cut out the patriarchy. I cut out everything. That being said, like, I'm still trying to figure out, and I think this is where I struggle with money, is money narcissistic? And I think I don't know. And I have this association of money's narcissist. Money's part of the system. So I'm going, whoa, whoa, is it? Or is money just the narcissist's favorite tool? I can't figure that out. I really need to just spend a day and analyze this and once and for all decide where money falls in. Is money part of the patriarchy or isn't it? Because if it is part of the patriarchy, I need to go over a full donation and just like, I need to figure something out. I need to become a monk probably. But that's because literally narcissism opposes my ethics. That's how strong my ethics are on this is if it's narcissist, it's the poison of psychology. Narcissism, I said I gotta write that down. See, yeah. Narcissism is the poison of psychology. So when you have that, I've literally systematically pulled all the narcissism out of my life. And I have just this one lingering, undefined, where does money fall? What is money? So I think that's going to be my next, let's sit down and analyze this. That's my next area of study. But that being said, you still have realm X over here. And that's what I'm going to talk about next is realm X. So this is the psychology. This is sociology. This is how society can go on to influence our psychology. Now, in our next video, I'm going to bring in realm X and show you how the two of them come together, work together, and how it's the other side of the coin. But this is the best part. Realm X is no narcissists allowed. It's great.